Also, if you're a chick, maybe give up on your dreams now, because I'm not gonna lie, women just ain't funny.
Women aren't funny.
So with the new addition to Helluva Boss just releasing about a week ago, and with the amazing digital circus still literally everywhere, I had high expectations for this release due to the bar that the previous episodes have raised, and with this being the mid-season special, it raised the bar even higher. This whole season in particular has focused on the general trend of building on the relationships between all the different main cast members of I.M.P. However, this episode breaks the mold, and mainly serves to build off the foundation that the previous episode has left us with. But although every single episode is focused on a different cast member of I.M.P., why did the writers decide to dedicate 2 back-to-back episodes on 2 side characters? Is it just to appease the many fans that these two have brought in? Or is there a more reasonable explanation that can mean a new era for the show? I'm gonna be breaking down and analyzing the spicy plotline of this episode. Then afterwards, I'll give quick observations on what this episode did right, tips on how this episode could have done a little bit better, if anything, and what the addition of this episode could potentially mean for the future of this show. Does Mammon's mid-season special stand the test of time as a solid episode over a week later, now that the new episode excitement has died down? It's time to take a closer look. The episode begins with a teen Blitz and Fizz having a gasm to Mammon, one of the 7 sins of hell representing greed, who is personified in this universe as a money-hungry clown who makes it very clear that he enjoys exploiting his fans, which makes sense, you know, being the sin of greed and all. But am I the only one who digs his accent? He announces that he will be starting to host an annual clown pageant to which the winner will become the face of Mammon's brand, to where we see that this is where Fizz gets his inspiration to make it big in the clown show business, which doesn't exactly sit well with everybody, which is made especially true when we are introduced to this NPC outside of Mammon's stadium, which prompts Fizz to doubt his clowning abilities, and we start to see his desire to be perfect. Cut to present day, and Fizz as we know it is the face and demon horny bait for Mammon's corporation, which has in essence turned Fizz into a slave. Now rounding the 10th annual clown pageant, to which Fizz has won every single one, Ozzy tries to convince Fizz that working for Mammon is not only a waste of time, but he's also being taken advantage of, obviously, as Mammon doesn't even perform anymore since he had put that responsibility solely on Fizz. Ozzy labels all his fans as creeps as a result of Mammon's presence, and that he was sick of seeing the one he cared about exploited and being objectified in the public eye. It's almost like the king of greed is acting, well, greedy. Couldn't imagine why. With Fizz ignoring his warnings, Ozzy takes matters into his own hands and phones for our old friend Blitz to assist with trying to talk Fizz out of participating in the clown pageant. And I'm so glad that Blitz is actually part of a trust circle outside of I.M.P and Stolas, thanks to the previous episode, since those two relationships were getting kind of repetitive and stale. You must remember, what gives Helluva Boss its appeal is its lore and its world-building story. This isn't Rick and Morty where they just go around on random adventures and there's kind of a story. It's good that they're making Blitz, which I would argue is a main character. Can't imagine why. More interconnected with various entities within Hell. Anyways, as Blitz tags along, we are first introduced to 2 basic rivals that are also given 2 basic names, Glitz and Glam. They are honestly annoying if anything. The more important bit here is that Blitz sees firsthand some of the abuse Mammon is putting Fizz through by scolding him to lose a few pounds when he quite clearly doesn't know what a mirror is. Blitz steps in but is just slapped with a poor attempt at an insult and is left alone with Fizz, who makes a very good point that he is already with Ozzy already, so why does he need Mammon? I think the writers were just lazy here, but Fizz gives quite a lackluster answer, saying he just needs the job. But currently, who exactly does Fizz need to prove his worth to? He's literally dating one of the 7 sins. I'll get into why this is a major gripe with this episode in a later scene, but this alone is just a very weak plot point that I feel is just sort of overlooked. With this, the pageant begins, but it doesn't take long for Fizz and Glitz/Glam to become the finalists, and each must present one final act to win. But before then, they are subjected to a forced meet and greet by Mammon, Mammon, and while the twins love the attention, Fizz is quite the opposite, as it was made quite clear in prior episodes that Fizz finds his own fans repulsive due to the fact that he was marketed as a sex icon and his fans react as such, rather than what he originally wanted to be when he was younger. Mammon, being the sin of greed and all, predictably doesn't give a shit about his feelings, only what would make him money. Aiming to continue to make Mammon proud and live up to his expectations, he goes out to meet his fans at his meet and greet, who are as horny as you would expect. But his demeanor changes when he notices a deaf fan amongst the crowd. And at first glance, the scene just seems cute and wholesome. But this is really the turning point for the episode. Since we have met him, Fizz has always thought his fans were one and the same, a bunch of horny freaks who care more about his attractiveness thanks to Mammon, now we know. But because of this interaction, he realizes that he is in fact serving as an inspiration to others, even though there aren't many. And to hammer this point home even further, the child was an imp like Fizz, and imps are seen at the bottom of the societal ladder in hell. Since the child also aspired to become a clown, Fizz saw himself in the child as he did the same thing with Mammon when he was a child. And this excellent scene is cut short by this annoying stalker from the beginning of the episode, who happens to be a cringe reviewer now, with his ass out all the time. Blitz steps in and decides to show him who's boss. But the confrontation already took a toll on Fizz, causing him to become a nervous wreck. It also doesn't help that Mammon steps in a little bit too late and tells him to get his act together, and letting the two K-pop chicks go first with their final act. And boy, did I not think the musical number could get any worse than Cotton Candy. Yup, it's even worse on the rewatch. But believe it or not, Fizz believes he is actually done for after watching their mid-at-best performance, and with the increasing internal pressure to prove himself to Mammon, Ozzy takes this as an opportunity to convince Fizz to drop the competition once and for all and be done with Mammon. However, in Fizz's twisted mind, he thinks it's because of his affiliation to Mammon he became as successful as he was, but most importantly, how Ozzy fell in love with him in the first place. While it's quite obvious already that someone would not be going to lengths like this to prioritize your mental well-being if they only care about your fame or success, it's still a rather important sequence that solidifies the dynamic of Fizz and Ozzy's relationship, and I'm all for it. Even if it was a predictable plot point, since in this case, being predictable helps fulfill most of the audience's expectations that these two need to be together, mine included. But in the end, Ozzy reveals just how committed he is to Fizz, regardless of status or affiliation to Mammon or the clowning industry. And after a short romantic music sequence that will surely get me into some legal trouble, O'Reilly Auto Parts, we are interrupted by the deranged reviewer again, but this time with a never mind. Thanks, Blitz. And with that, Fizzrolli gives his awaiting audience his final act. But I guess this next sequence was pretty predictable, as I was almost spot on with my plot prediction in my reaction video. I'm guessing this is gonna be like a fuck you to, is his name Mammon? Yeah. Wow. In all seriousness though, there's really not much to say about this final musical number. The lyrics gets rather repetitive, and I don't feel like censoring the entire music video out. All you need to know is this final portion.
I quit!
Yeah, I'll take it Mammon's probably not happy about that one. This launches him into an enraged state, turning him into Mr. Krabs for real. While Mr. Krabs goes apeshit, Fizz literally does not care and lets the baby throw his tantrum. Christ, Mammon. The K-pop girls seem to fit your narrative more anyway. Oh wait, he said women aren't funny. That's probably why. Oh, hello. Oh, what a lame and uninteresting character that I have no interest in. Luna is the only one I think is great, and Beelzebub. Anyway, back to Daddy Oz. With Ozzy's alternate sin form revealed in an effort to protect Fizz from Mammon, even though he clearly does not need it, Mammon takes this as an opportunity to taunt Ozzy about his secret relationship with Fizz, and if Fizz were to leave, he would reveal it to the public. But that completely backfires as Ozzy reveals it himself anyway, and astonishingly, no one was surprised, especially the one who looks like the average Twitter user when they hear about celebrity drama. But Mammon breaks out the classic villain line that he'll regret sharing that. How old are you, Mammon? 15? Oh, I know your dirty little secret you're going to pay. Yeah, right, buddy. But don't worry, you still have glitz and never mind. Thank God. The episode then ends with Ozzy and Fizz leaving Mammon Stadium for good, and Blitz asking the important questions.
So, who tops?
And with that, that is the end of the longest Helluva Boss episode to date, with a runtime of over 30 minutes. And although at first glance it may seem just like another episode with Ozzy and Fizzarali, I can assure you from an outside lens, there is more to meets the eye from the events of this episode that can quite literally change the course of the show to bring in new, interesting dynamics. Let's first get into what this episode objectively excelled in, and we'll get some bonus points from me. First off, I think I need to address the elephant in the room here. This episode did a fantastic job at continued world building, but the main scene I want to stress was the prospect of including occupants of hell who are actually impaired. This was the first time such a concept was introduced. Well, if you don't count this one.
I have like a rainbow in my...
Not only does this scene reinforce the softer aspect to Fizzarali that isn't all horny and clowning that we have been used to thus far, but it also helps continue the trend that has started with the very first episode in this season, which is addressing real-world issues that many viewers could face every day and relate with by incorporating some element of these into the plotline itself. And this is just my theory here on why they decided to choose a deaf individual, but it's because since that kid was not actually able to hear the horny garbage Mammon had been spewing and advertising about Fizz, they could actually recognize Fizz for their raw talent and what they can visually see. I can't stress how much I love it when writers reference real-world problems into their work. It just adds another layer of importance and relevancy and why you should follow along with the story and not just for surface-level entertainment value. The introduction of Mammon was also a very important strong suit of this episode, since not only are we introduced to another sin, which is more world building, but introduces yet another enemy, which could open the door for a variety of different directions the show could go. In my opinion, Mammon's design and casting choice fits him perfectly, and although he could be a bit too much at times, he's still a welcome addition to the roster. The last point I want to talk about is just the relationship building and character dynamics that this episode expanded on. While obviously Fizz and Oz's relationship were a big part of this episode, this also delves deep into Fizz's weaknesses and how he eventually overcame it, and also how Oz, rather than just seeming like an overprotective lover in the previous episode, actually has valid reasons for his concern that stem from the last episode, as he was mainly worried about the creepy fans that can go after Fizz, no thanks to Mammon. And while Blitz had a more minor role in this episode, the little adventures strengthened their bond even more, but these implications will become more prevalent later on in this analysis. So the question now is, what did this episode exactly lack, and what could have been improved upon? Well, the song could have been a little bit better. In stark contrast to Stolas' song at the end of episode 1 of this season, which I believe is the best song in the entire show, all of these songs relied on one verse of somewhat decent lyrics followed by the same repetitive phrase repeated over and over. I'm looking at you, K-pop wannabes. There was also way too many songs in this episode, with 4 in total, none of which except the one between Fizz and Oz are particularly memorable. I appreciate that they're trying to go for more songs, but quality over quantity rings true here, especially with that first song. It did not really need to be a song, it was more like a montage if anything. But other than that and these bricks, this episode was really solid plotline wise, except for the fact that the writers tried to say that Fizz only stuck with Mammon's abuse because he felt like he'd lose everything, including Ozzy, although it's quite clear from prior episodes that Ozzy just wouldn't do that. I feel like if there was a more compelling reason why he had to stay with Mammon for as long as he did rather than just needing to prove his worth, this episode would have been absolutely perfect. But it's not that big of a deal to the story right now, just a gripe I have with it. So what does this episode tell us about the future of Helluva Boss? Well, this episode single-handedly solidified Ozzy and Fizz's transition of just being side characters that are somewhat related to the main cast to joining the same level of importance as Stolas. And with Fizz now free from Mammon's grasp and with a stronger relationship to Blitz, Blitz, this could mean that Fizz and Oz could serve a greater importance to the main cast in the future, and potentially serve as a catalyst to clear Blitz's name, as he wasn't particularly regarded as the most popular figure in Hell, and we never got confirmation that Blitz's dad is actually gone, so Blitz and Fizz getting back together could prove useful if Blitz wants to ever make amends with his father, but he was a dick, so I couldn't blame him if he doesn't want to. But of course, this is all only speculation, and right now it's up to the writers to decide how they want to take the story from here on. But one thing is for sure, this episode opened the door to so many new possibilities, with Fizz and Oz now considered reliable allies to Blitz, which also brings up the question how Stolas would fit into this, because in the previous episode I proposed that Stolas' desire to give Blitz one of Ozzy's crystals so he didn't have to rely on his grimoire anymore was evidence that he is ready to move on now. But again, this is all speculation. This very plot point might be discussed as soon as next episode, but regardless, this mid-season episode is an essential bridge for an already astounding season. It is after taking all this into account that I will be putting season 2 episode 7 in the S tier category. So I still think it can't top episode 1, purely based on the fact that it is limited by their songs and the plotline is a little bit more insightful in episode 1, you know, cause it's based off the main relationship of the show, you know, Blitz and Stolas. Do you agree with my ratings for this episode? Also, what are your personal thoughts for this episode? Let me know in the comments below, as I love reading through your theories and insights beyond what was discussed in this video. And if you made it this far, feel free to drop a like and hit that teensy tiny little red subscribe button so you don't miss future videos like this. With that, I gotta look at some more Luna fan art. Until next time.